As you might know, the Bhagavad Gita is a 700-verse section drawn from the famous epic Mahabharata. The Bhagavad Gita is like a precious jewel nestled amongst the Mahabharata's 96,000 verses. The Gita is so extraordinary that it remains the most widely studied Hindu scripture. Yet, in addition to the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata includes many other sections that contain equally profound Vedantic teachings on a wide range of important topics. Those teachings are interwoven into the epic's extremely elaborate story. That story presents a brilliant and highly nuanced examination of dharma, righteousness. It's also rich in symbolism and filled with both worldly and spiritual wisdom. Mahabharata is the name of a war fought in Kurukshetra, a war between two families that competed for control over a wealthy kingdom. The first half of the epic introduces several generations of family members, and it also sets the scene for the upcoming battle. The second half gives a detailed account of the 18-day war and its terrible consequences. If you're not familiar with the story, there are two abridged translations that you might find helpful. One by Rajagopalachari and a longer one by Kamala Subramaniam. You can find links to those books below. If you really want to read a complete word-by-word translation, the multi-volume work of Ganguly is widely available. It's quite accurate, but it runs for 4,000 or 5,000 pages. Authorship of the Mahabharata is usually attributed to the great rishi Vedavyasa, the sage who compiled all 4 Vedas. In addition to composing the Mahabharata, Vedavyasa is also said to have composed all 18 Puranas, which are huge collections of spiritual stories, altogether containing more than 200,000 verses. Because of the tremendous size of these works, it's humanly impossible for them to have been composed by a single historical person. Vedavyasa was probably the first in a lineage of Vyasas. Even today, in parts of North India, Vyas is a common family name. Also, the name Vyasa is derived from a verbal root that means to arrange or compile. So, it seems likely that Vedavyasa himself compiled the Vedas, but it was his descendants who composed the Mahabharata and the 18 Puranas over a span of many generations. To understand how these enormous scriptures were composed, we first need to understand something about the tradition of storytelling. In ancient India and around the world, people everywhere love to tell and retell stories. And each time a story gets retold, the storyteller often adds something to embellish the story. Like the joke about the fisherman who said he caught a fish this long. The next time he told that story, the fish was this long, and the next time it was this long. In a similar way, those who told the story of the Mahabharata in ancient times added their own embellishments as they passed it on from one generation to the next. That's how the Mahabharata evolved over a number of centuries into the form we have today. That process of evolution resulted in three main versions of the epic, versions that are described in the Mahabharata itself. The first version is called Jaya, which means victory. Jaya is only 8,800 verses long. The second version is called Bharata, and it had grown to 24,000 verses in length. The final version reached 96,000 verses in length due to all the elaboration added by generations of storytellers. Now, if you ask, how old is the Mahabharata, we first have to determine which version you're referring to. Many scholars think that the 24,000-verse Bharata was probably composed around 400 BCE. That date is based on historical evidence and linguistic analysis. But if you ask, how old is Jaya, the first version, it's much harder to say. Scholars don't agree on its age, but it was probably composed long after the date of the battle itself. So then, when did that battle take place? Scholars have proposed a number of widely varying dates. 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, even 9,000 years ago. Personally, I don't think it's possible to accurately establish the date of the battle. Fortunately, knowing its date precisely isn't necessary for us to understand a story and imbibe its great wisdom. Today, the Mahabharata is available in several different published editions. Those editions are named after the places where they were edited. The Bombay edition is especially important. Not only does it contain all 96,000 verses, but there's also a complete commentary on it. Most Hindu scriptures are studied with the help of Sanskrit commentaries. In the 17th century, a scholar named Nilakantha composed a commentary on all 96,000 verses of the epic. That's an amazing accomplishment. In addition to the Bombay edition, there's also a Calcutta edition and a Kumbakonam edition. But today, the most widely used one is the Pune edition, which is also known as the critical edition. Over a span of 50 years, a highly skilled group of scholars in Pune reviewed more than 1,200 manuscripts, trying to produce the most authentic version possible. They faced a huge challenge in determining which verses belonged to the original text and which were added later. After carefully examining all the manuscripts, they removed many verses which they identified as being later additions. As a result, their edition, which was finally published in 1971, comes to just 89,000 verses. The fact that they removed about 7,000 verses shows the extent to which the text continued to evolve, even in comparatively recent times. When I compared the critical edition to the Bombay edition, I was surprised by some of the parts that had been left out. For example, the famous story about Dushasana trying to disrobe Draupadi was removed from the critical edition. Even though it's a powerful story, the scholars in Pune determined that it had been added at a later date, perhaps within the last 1,000 years. When I studied the Mahabharata, I generally use the Bombay edition because it includes Nilakanta's commentary. But in our classes here, we'll be using the critical edition because it's the most recent and because it's the only edition available in electronic form. One of the most striking features of the Mahabharata is its use of a literary technique that tells a story within a story within a story within a story. Let me explain. The Bhagavad Gita, as you know, is a dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna. In the Mahabharata, that dialogue is narrated to the blind king, Dhritarashtra, by his charioteer, Sanjaya. And their dialogue is narrated by Vyasa's disciple, Vaishampayana, to Janamejaya, the son of King Parikshit and great-grandson of Arjuna. In the Mahabharata, Janamejaya performs an elaborate snake sacrifice, Sarpa Satra, which went on for several days. He had invited many VIPs to attend the event, including great rishis and saints. In between the various rituals, there are long breaks, so to prevent his guests from getting bored during those breaks, Janamejaya arranged some entertainment for them. Of course, you can't entertain saintly guests with dancing girls. So he invited Rishi Vaishampayana to narrate the story of the Mahabharata to his guests. But there's one more level to this story within a story arrangement. A professional storyteller named Ugrashravas, or Suta, was present at Janamejaya's snake sacrifice, and he listened carefully as Vaishampayana narrated the Mahabharata. Ugrashravas later narrated his own version of the story during an elaborate ritual conducted by Rishi Shaunaka in the Naimisha forest. Now, let's recap all four levels. The dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna was narrated by Sanjaya to Dhritarashtra, and their dialogue was narrated by Vaishampayana to Janamejaya, and their dialogue was narrated by Ugrashravas to Rishi Shaunaka. Yet the succession doesn't stop there. Those dialogues will be taught here by Swami Tadatmananda, and later you might tell them to your grandchildren. The story lives on and on. One thing I really love about the Mahabharata is its realistic portrayal of each character. By realistic, I mean that all the good guys have some imperfections, and all the bad guys have some good qualities. It's interesting to compare this story to the Ramayana, which is much shorter and simpler. Rama is the good guy of the story, and Ravana is the bad guy. Like in American cowboy movies, where the good guys wear white hats and the bad guys wear black ones. Yet, in real life, people aren't like that. They're not simply good or bad. For example, people who have hurt your feelings again and again probably have some good qualities. Unfortunately, they don't share those good qualities with you. The reverse is also true. All good people have some undesirable traits. All those you love and respect have some shortcomings. even your parents. The simple fact is, no one is perfect. This complexity of human nature is vividly seen in the characters of the Mahabharata. Even the most despicable characters have some good qualities. Like Duryodhana. He was extremely loyal and faithful. He was the best friend you could have, as he was to Karna. On the other hand, noble characters like Bhishma had their defects. Bhishma was extremely stubborn, rigid. He could have prevented the war from starting, but he stubbornly held on to certain vows that prevented him from intervening. Upholding your vows is a great quality, but being rigid is not, especially when it results in so much death and destruction. Okay, that's enough introduction. Let's talk about our classes now. When I searched through the Mahabharata to find sections for us to study, I couldn't possibly read the entire text. Instead, I skimmed through Ganguly's word-by-word English translation. And then, when I found a relevant section, I turned to the original Sanskrit. I did this again and again for more than half a year until I had selected more than 70 passages. I then edited all those passages for the sake of brevity. The style of the Mahabharata is so elaborate that whatever can be said in just a few words gets expressed in 10 or 12 elegant verses. That style produces wonderful poetry, but for our Vedantic studies, it's better to be more concise. Now, before we begin Chapter 1, you can see that the Mahabharata consists of 18 books, and each book contains many chapters. The first book, the Adi Parva, contains 225 chapters. We'll begin by studying parts of chapters 1, 53, and 54. In those chapters, you'll notice something quite unusual. The story actually starts twice, in chapter 1 and again in chapter 53. The fact that the Mahabharata has two beginnings is evidence of the process of evolution we discussed before. The Adi Parva introduces most of the main characters and their family lineages. Long before Pandu and Dhritarashtra, and long before King Shantanu, the father of Bhishma, there lived an ancient king named Bharata, after which India gets its name, Bharat. Yet before this ancient king, a long lineage already existed, a lineage that began with Yayati and Kuru, from whom all the Kauravas descended. In addition to introducing all the characters, the Adi Parva also contains an elaborate backstory about Janamejaya's snake sacrifice. Dozens of chapters are devoted to the snakes themselves, describing how they came to be cursed after the king of the snakes killed Janamejaya's father, King Parikshit. We'll skip that lengthy backstory. Now we're ready to begin our study of the Mahabharata. First, let's recite its introductory prayer verse. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. Namaskritya, after bowing in reverence, after worshipping. Worshipping whom? Narayanam, Lord Vishnu, who incarnated as Sri Krishna and became a central figure in the Mahabharata. Naram cha eva narottamam. And after worshipping the highest person or supreme being, Atma, the true self or inner divinity that dwells within us all. Devim Saraswatim cha eva. And also after worshipping Goddess Saraswati, Goddess of knowledge and speech, whose blessings made the composition of the Mahabharata possible. Tataha, then, after worshipping Lord Vishnu, Atma, and Goddess Saraswati, Jayam Udirayet. May Jaya, may the Mahabharata now be told, narrated. We'll recite this beautiful verse at the beginning of each of our coming classes. Now we come to the very first words of the epic. Its opening passage is unusual because it's not metrical. It's not in verse form. Lo Maharshana Putra Ugra Shravaha Sutta Pauraniko Naimisharanye Shaunakasya Kulapatir Dwadasha Varshike Satre. Here, Rishi Vyasa introduces us to the first narrator, Ugra Shravas, who narrates the outermost story. Ugra Shravas is called Loma Harshana Putra, the son of Loma Harshana. Further, Ugra Shravas is a sutta, a professional storyteller, and he is Pauranika, well-versed in old stories like the Puranic scriptures. Then, Naimisha Aranye, in the Naimisha forest, Satre, at the sacrifice, the ritual, Dwadasha Varshike, the ritual that's conducted every 12 years, Shaunakasya, by Rishi Shaunaka, who is Kulapati, the head of his family or lineage. Ugra Shravas had been invited by Shaunaka to attend this ritual and to narrate the Mahabharata. Then, Samasinan abhyagachat brahmarshin samshita vratan vinaya vanato bhutva kadachit sutanandanaha. Kadachit, once upon a time, Suta Nandana, the traditional storyteller, Ugra Shravas, abhyagachat, he approached Brahmarshin, a group of great rishis who were samshita vratan, purified by performing harsh penances. Samasinan, they were sitting there in the Naimisha forest, having been invited to participate in Shaunaka's 12-year ritual. Great rishis must be approached respectfully, so Ugra Shravas is Vinaya Avanata Bhutva, bowed down with humility and reverence. Next. Tamashramam hanupraptam naimisharanyavasinaha chitra shrotum kathastatra parivavrustapaswinaha. Anupraptam. When Ugrashravas arrived there, tam ashramam, at Shaunaka's ashram, at the hermitage where the rituals were being conducted. Naimasha aranya vasinaha. The rishis who lived in the Naimasha forest, tapaswinaha, who practiced various kinds of penance, shrotum parivavrus. They wanted to listen, to hear. Chitra kathas, the wonderful story, the story of the Mahabharata. The rishis were delighted by the arrival of Ugrashravas because they looked forward to his narration during breaks between rituals. Okay, we'll stop here and continue with Chapter 1 in the next class. This introduction you're watching right now was recorded many years after I taught the Mahabharata here at our ashram, starting in 2015. Back then, we only recorded audio for each class, not video. Fortunately, a group of dedicated and skillful volunteers have produced videos for all those classes. They started with the original audio recordings and then added Sanskrit texts, transliteration, and my line-by-line translation of each verse. I hope their hard work will make it easier for you to more fully appreciate the wonderful Vedantic teachings found in the Mahabharata.